Ladies and gentlemen, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome the U-175 parade. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I am pleased to call on Pastor Abel Gillen of the Pacific Mission Fellowship to offer our opening prayer this morning. Thank you, Pastor Gillen. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinct honor to introduce our first speaker. This morning who will be delivering a welcoming remark on behalf of the Governor of POHNPEI State. The Honorable Bedwell Henry first entered public service as a teacher at the Pacific Island Central School. He served in the POHNPEI District Legislature, where he held such positions as President, Vice President, Speaker, Chairman of the Political Committee, and Chairman of Legislative Charter Revision Committee. He also served as Mechanician Advisor to the United States delegation to the United Nations Trusteeship Council. He was elected to the First Congress of Mechanician and served for one session as a floor leader of the House of Representatives. He became Speaker in his second congressional session and held the speakership through all the remaining years of the Congress of Mechanician. Then held that position through the first 8 years of the Congress of the United States of Micronesia from 1979 to 1987. He has served on numerous boards, committees, and commissions, including as Vice Chair of the POHNPEI State Constitutional Convention and founding board members of CARE Micronesia. He is currently the POHNPEI State Representative to the Joint Committee on Compact Review and Planning, and a well-respected leader in his church and community. One Baron Henry is from Oakville, one of the outer islands of POHNPEI, where he was born 86 years ago. He was born on March 3, 1934, and has 7 children with his late wife, Marina Henry. His wise leadership, fairness and honesty, integrity and professionalism have gained him much respect in politics, in the church, and in the community. Ladies and gentlemen, let's all join hands and welcome Honorable Bedwell Henry.
Thank you very much. I didn't want to reveal my age. Thank you for inviting me to speak. Before I proceed, I want to pay my respect to the professional leaders in POHNPEI, all the leaders, the Secretary of Foreign Affairs with us, and all the government representatives of the friends around the world, and the leaders of the churches who are here with us. My respect to all of you. As we have heard, we gather here to commemorate the 75th year of the United Nations. And on behalf of Governor Green Oliver and the leadership in POHNPEI, I welcome everyone that is here with us, and also those that are listening to us. In this program to commemorate, remember, pay our gratitude and support for this world organization, United Nations. In the late 1940s onward, in POHNPEI, United Nations Day was the biggest celebration. In those days, we didn't have this commercial board. No one owned a car. So people would come to Colonia from the other municipalities in POHNPEI to celebrate the United Nations in sport activities, mainly track and field. Kosana, which was part of POHNPEI district, sending athletes to compete in these Southeast events. One time I remember the Deputy High Commissioner flew in from Saipan to address gathering UN Day. I remember that because I was his interpreter. So it was a big celebration for many years in POHNPEI, commemorating this very important worldwide recognition. But I think today's event is more significant. It is more significant because not only do we have POHNPEI here, we have the entire epicenter here. Plus, we have our friends from other countries with us in this celebration. And plus, we celebrate a body that we, including people that were once dependent and now independent, are part of it. So we celebrate the body we all belong to. We know that in the human now, there are over 190 nations that are members. And we know that some of the members, like I said, were dependent people who are becoming independent because of the acting effort of the UN. And now our members, some of the members now are helping, were enemies to the Second World War, but they are now together in trying to share the work to bring about peace, security, and health to a world that needs this kind of cooperation. So today, we are asked to bear tribute to this very important United Nations, and we are thankful that it is an extension that we are all working together to maintain its goals and objectives. We thank the committee that planned this gathering, and we thank all of you for joining us in this very important celebration. And we can enjoy the words prepared for us.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am privileged to introduce our next speaker, who will be delivering the UN 75th anniversary speech on behalf of the President of the ANNIVERSARY. The Honorable Candy A. has an inevitable nearly 30 years of career in foreign service, having joined the ANNIVERSARY Department of Foreign Affairs in 1992. Prior to his work with Foreign Affairs, he was an administrative officer with the ANNIVERSARY Supreme Court from 1985 to 1991.
Hello?
He has held roles on various boards and committees, including as Chairman of the Board of Directors for the National Oceanic Resource Management Authority. Most recently, prior to becoming Secretary of Foreign Affairs under David and George administration, he was the Embassy Consul General in Honolulu, Hawaii. He is a graduate of Xavier High School in June and furthered his education at Rutgers University, the University of California, Berkeley, and California State University. Secretary Eliasar hails from Namaluk and Kudu Islands in the Mortals of Chuk State. He married to Madrina Eliasar and they have 4 children. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Honorable Candy A. Eliezer, Secretary of the USM Department of Foreign Affairs.
Thank you, MC. Officials of the National and State Guard, represented here by Mr. Henry and Mr. Hilon, and others, including my friend at the Executive Director of NORMA. Members of the Diplomatic Corps, I recognize Ambassador Kashima, resident representatives from the various human agencies based in the country, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. Let me at the outset pay my respect to the custodians and owners of the land on which I stand, particularly traditional leaders and elders of POHNPEI. I also want to initially thank the United Nations Joint President's Office, led by Mr. Cromwell Bacaressa, Chief of UNICEF, for the invitation to join this auspicious occasion, marking the 75th anniversary of our premier world body, the United Nations. And I do so on behalf of President Manuelo, who sends his warm wishes for a happy United Nations Day, as well as sincere congratulations for reaching this important milestone in the history of our United Nations. When the United Nations was founded 75 years ago, it was with the original intent to maintain peace and security throughout the world. Having lived through devastation and suffering of 2 world wars, the world felt it had enough of wars and was deeply committed to prevent another world war, which, through the visionary leadership of the victors of World War II, met in San Francisco to establish the United Nations, whose charter came into force on October 24, 1945. 75 years later, with a membership of 193 nations strong, the United Nations has so far been successful at preventing the occurrence of a major war or a third world war, heaven forbids. On this momentous occasion, as we gather in festivities to mark this historic achievement of the human race, recognized worldwide as United Nations Day, we in the FSM can be reminded of the long journey towards self-government and the historical significance that journey has been in our ties with the United Nations. It is a journey that took us through various colonial powers until we became a strategic trust of the United Nations under the administrative authority of the United States in 1945, which came to an end in 1986 when we became an independent nation. Since independence, we became a member of the United Nations in 1991 and assumed our rightful place in the international community of nations. At 34 years old, FSM has established diplomatic relations with 86 countries around the world in our own name and right. We posted overseas 5 embassies, 3 consulates general, and a number of honorary consulate offices. We currently host 4 foreign missions or foreign embassies and a few international and regional organizations who are represented here today. We have done all these in our own name and right. FSM and its people can be proud of these achievements made in our 34-year journey as a nation, which have earned us recognition, respect, and friendship in the international community of sovereign and independent nations. Thanks to our international friends and partners who supported our key membership in the United Nations, not the least, we also thank our forefathers, one of whom is right here with us, for their wisdom and foresight to make the aims of our UN membership a lived reality. Through our membership in the United Nations and its related agencies, FSM has a seat at the table and has enjoyed an equal voice on many pressing issues confronting our global community. We have reaped substantive benefits through these international connections based on our shared values and interests achieved through the principles of solidarity, inclusivity, and multilateralism. These principles constitute a vital component of our foreign relations in advancing our national interests, as well as in playing our part in shaping a future for us all. Last month, President Manuel emphasized that the Federated States of Micronesia itself is a product of multilateralism, is committed to the theme of shaping our future together. He noted it is crucial in both times of peace as well as times of calamity that the international community stand together, and that an infringement on the rights of one is the same as an infringement on the rights of us all. Whether we choose to call it multilateralism, inclusivity, or simple human decency, we all are much more alike than we are different. All human life matters, and our nation calls upon the global community to embrace solidarity and empathy with one another. During this 2020 to 2030 as a decade of action to achieve our 17 Global Sustainable Development Goals, perhaps it is worth taking a moment to reflect on the notions of solidarity, cooperation, and taking responsibility to advance achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals at all levels. At the global level, feelings are mentioned, grievances can be voiced. There are peaceful and productive solutions that benefit everyone. For the FSM to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, which range from gender equality and equity in education attainment to access to clean water and affordable electricity, it requires that on the national level, the state level, the community level, the familial level, and the individual level, that we recognize and practice the act of self-expression for the purpose of self-actualization. We can see how seemingly abstract, large-scale problems have at their heart concrete personal-level solutions. The FSM rightfully maintains that climate change is an existential threat to the Pacific region, which we can see in our own paradise, in our own backyard. Climate change is presently affecting remote island atolls such as Kapingamarangit, Uliay, and even my islands of the Mormons. At the level of the United Nations, the FSM voices its concerns to the world, calling for action on the Paris Agreement and the Kyoto Protocol. At the level of bilateral relations with the United States, Japan, the People's Republic of China, and Australia, FSM calls upon its friends and allies to view climate change as a threat to food security, quality of life, and environmental health, and to take proactive measures toward using renewable energy. At the national level, the FSM recognizes its reliance on the importation of fossil fuels and is working to expand FSM Petroleum Corporation mandate to include an emphasis on renewable energy. At the state level, the state of Chuk, in partnership with Vital and SoftBank, is constructing the integrated coconut processing facility, which will create jobs and earn needed income from exportable products, whilst providing clean energy to the island of Palawan in Chuk State. At the community level, remote islands such as Patin and Mopiloa are relying on solar panels. At the familial level, many of us are working to install solar panels and solar lights at our homes. On the individual level, each one of us can reject one-time use plastic bottles for drinking water. The beauty of the United Nations and the beauty of genuine respect and cooperation with one another is that this same formula of making an abstract, large-scale problem into a concrete, personal-level solution applies to virtually any challenge we can imagine. It is synthesized into the notion that words allow us to express how we feel and come to a consensus of what is true, to be followed by a commitment, and that commitment itself is an action, not a word, demonstrated by what we do at the individual, familial, community, state, national, and global level. Decades ago, the global community through the United Nations and the World Health Organization in particular recognized the threat of a disease called smallpox. You have never heard or you have never had smallpox, and you will never will, because in 1980, the world eradicated. A century prior, smallpox reduced bushfires population from 10,000 to 300. Estimates range from 90 to 95% of indigenous people in North and South America perished from it. But through global solidarity, through through multilateralism, through the commitment of seeing a large-scale problem and acting at every level, from the macrocosm to the microcosm, the disease is history. It has been wiped out. Eliminating this disease is one of humanity's single greatest accomplishments, made possible through cooperation and respect by expressing our feelings to reach a consensus and demonstrating a commitment to find a resolution. We can do the same, or at least something similar, with the COVID-19 pandemic. Through multilateralism and cooperation, through simple human decency of listening to each other and working together, we can find and distribute vaccine to each and everyone. One final issue that I wish to highlight in our anniversary celebration of the UN Charter is that the ANNIVERSARY national government has been lineage advocating for the implementation of the United Nations multi-country office to be based in the North Pacific. We are pleased and proud that this multi-country office has been confirmed to be forthcoming, and we are actively seeking the appropriate land and resources to host the office. It has taken over 15 years for us to achieve this result. With challenges on a global scale affecting other nations like ours in the Pacific, a UN presence on the ground would be extremely helpful. This important position reflects the UN commitment, or UN's commitment to address the concerns of even the most vulnerable and smallest of its members. Micronesia is proud to become the host for this office and extends its gratitude to both the United Nations at large as well as its brothers and sisters in the North Pacific for their support. As President Manuela said at his 75th United Nations address, a better world is not something we ask for. A better world is something we build. We define a better world through consensus, with a foundation of empathy and love for other human beings. We construct a better world by acknowledging that we are who we choose to be, and then choosing to take responsibility for both ourselves and our communities. For the small nations of the world, like the FSM, the United Nations today is more important than ever before. Despite its challenges and imperfections, as any human creations, the United Nations remains the last beacon of hope for humanity, because its founding mission is more critical than ever before, that of promoting human dignity, protecting human rights, and respecting international law to ensure peace and security for us all. Thank you.
Kini sa Japon, nakalalangap Secretary of Health. Ladies and gentlemen, I am pleased to introduce our final speaker for today, who will be delivering special remark on behalf of the UN Resident Coordinator for the Pacific Office. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the UN, FSM UN Country Team Lead, Mr. Cromwell Pagaresi.
Thank you very much, Nancy. It gives me great honor and privilege to deliver this special remarks of our Resident Coordinator, Mr. Sanat. Your Excellency, President David W. Carvalho, represented by Secretary ANNIVERSARY. Governor Reed Oliver, represented by Governor of Hungary. Traditional leaders, church leaders, cabinet members, members of the diplomatic corps, friends, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, Asalalia, Ranani, Venmo, Monitin, my respects to one and all. Dreams can change the world. 3/4 of a century ago, just such a dream, the United Nations was born out of the ashes of the worst catastrophe the world had ever experienced. The countries of the world united to save the succeeding generations from the scourge of war. and agreed on a charter that had served as a guiding principle for the United Nations and the global community for the past 75 years. But as wars continue to displace millions around us, poverty continues to permeate across continents. Terrorism endangers the fabric of our global society. Diseases spread easily across national borders, and climate change threatens our very existence. One could be forgiven for wondering whether the determination of our forefathers, the global partnership, will bring peace and prosperity to everyone is nothing but an unattainable and ill-defined aspiration. Yes, despite the many challenges, we, the peoples of the United Nations, still zealously cling to the belief that what binds us together as one civilization must be preserved at any cost. The survival of humanity depends on it. A stronger UN, a better world. We say with so much conviction. While the record of the United Nations is not perfect, it remains a beacon of hope for the world. Each day, the UN feeds the hungry, shelters those driven away from their homes, vaccinates children, and fights disease, defends rights for all, mediates peace, and brings peacekeepers to all corners of the world, and tries to build consensus to save our planet for future generations. Every day, countries, citizens, private sector, and civil society, men and women, young and old, use the platform and spaces provided by the United Nations in the pursuit of a better life for humanity. But recognizing that the United Nations had its moments of disappointment, the Secretary General launched a reformed the organization just under 2 years ago to create a more agile, effective, inclusive, and accountable organization. This year, we also launched a global conversation on the future we want and the UN we need. More than 1 million have already spoken. Here in the Pacific Islands, thousands of voices have been recorded through virtual means as well as numerous sessions. We will engage in such a dialogue this morning and the mornings to come, across the region today and the coming weeks. As COVID-19 headwinds evolve around an ever-shrinking world, we know that our challenges are interconnected, our future interdependent, and the success of the solutions we develop will create a hinge to reinvigorate multilateralism and global action. Only by working together can we overcome this pandemic, because we are only as strong as our weakest link. As long as there is COVID-19 somewhere, there is always possibility of COVID-19 everywhere. At the same time, we also know that after 7.5 decades, that the 3 pillars of the United Nations, peace and security, development, and human rights are not only equally important, but also interrelated and interdependent. As former Secretary General Kofi Annan once said, there cannot be peace without development, no development without peace, and neither without human rights. Reaffirming this conviction in 2015, as the world's leaders committed to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030 and poverty, fight inequality, fight injustice, and tackle climate change. Last month, the heads of state, government, representing the people of the world gathered virtually to mark the 75th anniversary of the United Nations. Having heard concerns and aspirations of the peoples through a global conversation in a clear that there is no other organization with the legitimacy, convening power, and normative impact of the United Nations. No other global organization gives hope to so many people for a better world and can deliver the future we want. We resolve to leave no one behind in achieving the 2030 agenda, to protect our planet, to promote peace, and prevent conflicts, to abide by international law, and to ensure justice, to place women and girls at the center, to listen and work with youth, to build trust, to improve digital cooperation, and be prepared for health-related crises. And in so doing, they committed to ensure sustainable financing and boost partnership while upgrading the United Nations to deliver in the future we aspire to have. Here in the Pacific, I would like to reaffirm our commitment to the governments and people we serve that we will continue to spare no effort to work in partnership with all of you in all these areas as we strive together to fulfill the promise of the United Nations. In the spirit of celebration, remembering a rich 75 years collective past, but also in the spirit of reflection and humility, we invite you to engage in the conversation today and the weeks to follow. It is a unique opportunity for us to come together in the spirit of tolerance to reaffirm our faith in the dignity and worth of the human person, no matter what age, sex, ethnicity, degree of disability, national origin, religious persuasion, social, economic, or political standing. Let us seek and embrace diversity of all kinds. For it is only when we become more understanding of others and they of us that we evolve as a human race towards a world of lasting peace and respectful human rights and sustainable development for all building resilient nations and empowering lives. Everyone's voice is important, everyone's dream must be celebrated, everyone's fears must be addressed, everyone's vulnerability must be recognized, everyone's potential contribution must be accounted. Through a mutually respectful dialogue that inherently seeks to understand each other, we will no doubt create a better world for our children that we found ourselves. On behalf of the United Nations family across the Pacific, welcome to the UN Day event, and thank you for making this day and this organization what it is. Kalahan, Kineso Chapo, Kulu Malulata.
I would like to defer the mic to one of the UNICEF staff to help us conclude the last item on our agenda.
Ladies and gentlemen, all around the world over the past year, countries have been celebrating UN 75 in their own way. Here in the FSM, we have decided to launch a UN-focused dialogue series to raise awareness on various pressing issues in our country. What better time than in the lead-up to the 16 days of activism? I would like to invite the facilitators of these events to come to the front while I read them out in the order that they will be happening in the coming weeks. I have representatives from the U.S. Embassy, FSM Department of Health and Social Affairs, UNICEF, Australia, UNDP, Australian Volunteers International, and ILO. Please to the front. This is a prime example forged to launch this dialogue series. Today's event, if you notice from your programs, is actually the first in the UN-focused dialogue, FSM National Awareness Series. You will note the tables that have been set up around this venue. These are UN agencies, government offices, embassies, regional and civil society organizations, all of whom are implementing sustainable development goals. What we have lined up in the coming weeks include November 7th, which is a day to mark International Day Against Violence and Bullying at Schools, including cyberbullying, which will start with a virtual play facilitated by the U.S. Embassy along with POHNPEI Girl Scouts and Friends of the POHNPEI Public Library. On November 14th, World Diabetes Day, the FSM Department of Health and Social Affairs will be leading a community outreach that will include eye screenings, diabetes, and blood pressure screenings in the communities of POHNPEI. On November 20th, World Children's Day, facilitated by UNICEF, an event will be held that will be the first deadline for an art contest that will include 2 categories: kindergarten to 4th graders and 5th grade to 8th graders, about what kind of future children in the FSM would like to see. On November 25th, the Australian Embassy will be facilitating for International Day of Elimination of Violence Against Women, and that will be the deadline for a poetry contest with more details to follow. On December 4th, a regional webinar on International Volunteers Day will be facilitated by the United Nations Development Program, including our UN volunteer, Ms. Edna. On December 5th, the U.S. Embassy and POHNPEI Girl Scouts will be facilitating a Persons with Disabilities event, and Australian Embassy and Australian Volunteers International will also be facilitating an International Volunteers Day event. On December 9th, the U.S. Embassy and various other organizations will be holding an International Anti-Corruption Day event, and that will be the deadline for an essay contest on what high school students in the FSM would like to see as the future of the FSM, with the theme anti-corruption. And finally, to culminate all of these events, on the afternoon of December 11th, a Human Rights Day Fair will be held in collaboration by all of these organizations, showcasing contest winners and presentation of prizes. Some of you may have noticed that the United Nations office in Bologna has been lit up blue at night. There is a challenge that has already started for anyone who can submit the best photo of the building with a deadline of December 4th. All the winners to be announced for these contests will include prizes such as iPhones, Samsung phones, school supplies, gift certificates, phone cards, and much, much more. So what's the challenge for today, you might ask? There are 2. The first one is the Best Information Booth Challenge, meaning the table that gets a lot of visitors and has the best products, and a selfie challenge, which you all are invited to join, tagging yourself here at today's event with some type of UN75 or SDG memorabilia in the background or foreground with a hashtag UN75FSM on Facebook, or if you don't have a Facebook, show myself, Gina Siegel, or one of the UN staff your selfie to be entered into this contest to win a prize at the end of today's event at 12:30. That only gives you 2 hours to get all your photos in. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. This is the launch of our events for the next few weeks of activism in the FSM. Thank you to all our stakeholders and sponsors of these events.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, this brings to an end to our formal program for this morning. And on behalf of everyone, I would like to invite everyone to the information booth. Kailangan kasalili.